Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to a special edition of Movie Goodness here on the KB Radio Network. I'm your host, Kevin Reed, and I am bringing you the review of Marvel Studios' latest release, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. How are we doing out there, everybody? Welcome to Phase 5 of the MCU. We are off and running into this brand new phase of the MCU with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the 31st film in the MCU and the third film in the Ant-Man series. Uh, this is a franchise, and not the MCU, but the three Ant-Man films that have not been like the most well received of the entire 31 films in the MCU. These are more standalone-ish type films. Ant-Man from 2015 was like it's a standalone thing, connected to the MCU, but doing his own thing. When we moved on to the sequel in 2018, Ant-Man and the Wasp, once again, connected to the MCU, but doing his own thing. This go around with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, this is connected. It's still doing his own thing, but deep ties to the MCU moving forward. This was an important film in the MCU. You could take away Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp out of the MCU completely, and it still flows perfectly. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't affect nothing as far as the storytelling, that singular storytelling throughout the thread of the MCU. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is a different animal. It's essential to this saga, the multiverse saga of the MCU, because we are introduced to the big bad, the heavy, Kang the Conqueror in this film. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is directed once again by Peyton Reed, who directed the two previous Ant-Man films. It is written by Jeff Loveness, who is one of the writers from Rick and Morty. MCU has been using Rick and Morty writers throughout Phase 4 and and beyond. I guess they're big fans of Rick and Morty, as I am. I am a huge fan of Rick and Morty. I don't know if their material is working for the MCU, at least going by Phase 4. It's not really connecting with the contingents of fans. The film stars once again Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne, the Wasp, Catherine Newton as Cassie Lang. You have Michelle Pfeiffer as Janet Van Dyne, and Michael Douglas as Dr. Hank Pym. And we get the introduction of Jonathan Majors inside the MCU playing Kang the Conqueror. And when I say introduced, I mean introduced. This is a spoiler review. And I'm telling y'all now, this is the third time I'm recording this review. I tried to review I reviewed this. I did this the first time. My first take was a non-spoiler. And that review lasted 7 minutes because I couldn't talk about nothing. The second time, I tried to split it up. I tried to do a non-spoiler with a couple of spoilers, and I ended up spoiling the whole thing, and it just did not come out right. So common sense tapped me on the shoulder and said, can I please come in? And I said, go ahead, please. Now I'm just going to do a full spoiler review of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So if you have not seen Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and you do not want to be spoiled, pause or stop or download this episode. go watch Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and come back and play it, and we can join in the conversation together. So you have been warned. This is a full-on spoiler review of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I feel 10 times better now that I have said that. The struggle is over. We're going full bore now. Yes, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. My overall thoughts of this film. If you liked Ant-Man, if you liked Ant-Man and the Wasp, you 9 times out of 10 you're gonna like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It's not gonna blow your socks off. It is nothing new. There's nothing different from the previous two Ant-Man films in this franchise. It's Ant-Man. Paul Rudd is Scott Lang. There's nothing different. I really, as far as the story is concerned, it has deeper stakes, but it's an Ant-Man film. That's the way I walked away from it. I sat in the truck a minute. On the drive home, I just thought about it, and because I was on the fence. At no point did I dislike this movie. I actually enjoyed it. I was entertained, but as far as blew my socks off, it didn't do that. I have problems with this movie. I have a lot of problems with this movie, to be upfront and honest with you. But I can say, first off the bat, coming with my positives, is hands down Michelle Pfeiffer and Jonathan Majors stole the movie. This is Michelle Pfeiffer's movie. I don't know why they named this Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It should have been Janet Van Dyne Quantumania. This was her movie. She has a huge upgrade from her appearance in Ant-Man and the Wasp. I was so impressed. I shouldn't say impressed. I mean, this is Michelle Pfeiffer here. It ain't like this is a unknown actress here or somebody who is known for giving poo-poo performances. Michelle Pfeiffer is a revelation. I mean, she's been doing this for decades, and the woman is still beautiful. She is still beautiful. Even in the flashback scenes when they de-aged her and they went back to the present scenes, it looks like they didn't really touch up nothing. They didn't do anything to mess with her look. She is still beautiful. It looks like she can still play Catwoman. I mean, honestly, but that's besides the point. Her acting in this film was just incredible. Her and Jonathan Majors, the scenes that they had together were they did not belong in this movie. And that was the problem. One of the problems I had with this film. At moments when you have acting chops such as Jonathan Majors, who is acting circles around everybody. And it's like, man, you in the wrong movie. It felt like he was look, I don't want to denigrate this film. This is a film. This is a Marvel property. Yes, it's a big budget superhero comic book movie, whatever, but it's a film. But it felt like at times, like Jonathan Majors, this movie was beneath you, dog. His acting in this movie was like award consideration type acting. And I'm not joking. This was an amazing performance. It did not belong in this film. Yet, this was the perfect film to introduce this character. I understand completely why. He was exiled there by his other variants, trapped there because of how dangerous he is. So, okay, you get it. And he's in the quantum realm. Who knows the quantum realm better than the Pyms and the Van Dynes and Scott Lang? And so, okay, it makes sense. And it made sense the way they did it. But man, Jonathan Majors, my God. And then the scenes with Jonathan Majors and Michelle Pfeiffer were like, my God, this doesn't belong here. This does not belong in this movie. When they did that those flashback to those scenes, and then they went back to the current time, I was upset. I immediately got upset. I wanted more. I want that story. That's the story I wanted to see. I don't want to see this, you know. But it is what it is. Paul Rudd, I can't say nothing bad about Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd is he's Ant-Man. He's Scott Lang. He's consistent throughout these films. There's nothing new. There was the scene in the end when him and Kane were fighting, I felt was the best of Paul Rudd in these MCU films that you're gonna get. Because clearly he could not stand toe to toe with King the Conqueror. And when you look at Paul Rudd, you're like, no, he cannot stand toe to toe against Jonathan Majors either. Jonathan Majors is a large human being. He is a big dude, and he was brutal in that fight. And they made it to whereas it wasn't unbelievable. Like Scott Lang can overpower Kane because Kane is an Avengers level top tier villain in the comic. He is up there with Thanos, people. That type of level. Kane the Conqueror is not to be played with. So for him to go toe to toe with Ant-Man, it was like that's what gave me kind of a doubt going into this movie. Like, why is he going to go? Why are they putting him against Ant-Man in this film? But he mollywopped Ant-Man. I'm like, man, did you even pinch him? It was when Scott Lang punched him. Even when he let him punch him and he just shrugged it off. He like, really? It was like that look he gave. He like, come on, man. And he commenced to mollywop him. I enjoyed it. I like that's how it was supposed to be. I love MODOK. I did. I love MODOK. And honestly, I went into this movie thinking I was not gonna like MODOK, but I did. I did. They brought back Darren Cross, played by Corey Strode, who played him in the first film. He was Yellow Jacket. And we remember at the end, and they did the flashback at the end of Ant-Man from 2015 when he, I guess, I don't know what, I forgot how he did it, but he just crumbled up and went into the quantum realm and just like crippled them or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's how he became MODOK. Granted, a deviation from the comics, but I loved how they did it. Great presentation. Enjoyed it, man. I'm like, and I actually like Corey Strode's portrayal of MODOK. I'm like, oh man, this is great. This was great. I enjoyed that. Bill Murray, and I don't know, would you classify this as a supporting role or a cameo? I don't know. He was only in one scene, but I did like him, despite the fact that he was Bill Murray. He was the same as he is in every movie, but I liked it. I liked it in that particular scene that he was in, and the little turn that he had. I was like, okay, he had a little turn. I'm like, I get it. I'm feeling it, and he actually looked like he was given an actual performance. He started off as Bill Murray, and then he ended on like this dark turn, and I felt it. I'm like, okay, we getting somewhere here. My negatives. My negatives. There were a couple of characters in this film that I don't know why they were in the movie. And they were major characters. These aren't supporting characters I'm talking about. They were major characters. The number one is in the title. Wasp. This movie is called Ant-Man and the Wasp. Quantumania. Where is Wasp? Evangeline Lilly, she just and it wasn't her fault. It was just the movie. She wasn't in the movie. I mean, she was there, but she was just there. There was no purpose to her character at all. None. You can count on maybe one hand. You might can sneak over to the second hand and count how many times Hope Van Dyne had dialogue in this movie. A complete waste. A complete waste. I don't. There was no purpose to her character, but she wasn't alone. Michael Douglas as Dr. Hank Pym. No purpose. Now I know those of us who've seen the film, you say, "Oh man, well he came at the end with the ants." Well, okay, but prior to that, what did he do? He was just there. You know what I'm saying? He flew the ship. That I'm sorry. I just could not. I couldn't rock with it, man. It did nothing for me. His character did nothing for me. Even when he came at the end with the ants, I was like, it didn't work. Honest God, it did not work. But the biggest bugaboo, as far as characters are concerned, was Catherine Newt, as Cassie Lane. This hurts me because I was looking forward to her as Casey Lane, and this was a bad performance by her. And I really like her. I watched her in Freaky, that film that came out a couple of years ago that it was her and Vince Vaughn, and Vince Vaughn played a serial killer, and they had switched bodies. So she had the serial killer personality, and Vince Vaughn had the teenage girl personality. It was an all right movie. It was what it was. It wasn't going to win no Academy Awards, of course, but it was good. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed her in it. So I was excited for her to make her MCU debut as Cassie Lane. Bruh, there was scenes in here where she was supposed to emote. She was supposed to crack a joke. She was supposed to be upset. She was supposed to cry. She was supposed to be serious when she gave that speech to rally the troops to storm the Capitol or whatever. She had the exact same facial expression the entire movie. I've never seen her forehead wrinkle at all. It's not one time, man. I mean, she didn't give any emotion in any line of dialogue that she gave. And I know she can act. I've seen her act. So that's why I'm like in a state of confusion right now, because I'm like, what happened? What happened? I did not like her performance at all. At all. But it looks like they setting up for her to be something moving forward. If you notice from phase 4, and I guess going into phase 5 now, that all these characters, all these previous films are introducing new or younger versions of that character. Thor, you got the daughter. Hawkeye, you have Kate Bishop. They even Hulk got Scar. His son. They threw that in. All these characters are getting younger versions of themselves. So now you have Casey Lane as Stature, who is in the comics. So they're moving on to these, I guess, young Avengers they're setting up. That's all fine and good, but I don't know, man. That's a bummer there. To get off the acting, the special effects were not really good in this movie. Now you're dealing with a movie that's 90% set in the quantum realm, so I knew it was going to be a lot of CGI, of course, but it looked bad in points. It looked bad. There were scenes where you could see the outline of the characters, them standing in front of a green screen. And I'm like, oh man, that looks bad. that looks bad. Yeah, man. For a movie like this, y'all really, I say y'all, the filmmakers, you need to spend that extra money on the special effects. You know, this is a special effects driven film. That's like going to see Avatar and and the special effects at any point look choppy. That's not good. That's not a good look. you know. But yeah, the special effects weren't all that good. The inhabitants of the quantum realm, uh, I understand why they were there. I get why they were there, but it came off real Star Warsy. And my wife and my daughters, when we were leaving the theater, that was the first thing they said, and I was like, man, they were thinking the same thing. They thought that I thought it was just me. That's why I didn't mention it. But I was like, yeah, it do. It's like a Star Wars ripoff here. You know, it just felt Star Warsy, and I, it just didn't feel like an Ant-Man movie. I guess that's the end. That's my end result. It did not feel like a Ant-Man movie. Um, I will address this. My final point of this movie. I hate. I don't hate nothing in this movie except this one thing. Killing Kane. As I mentioned before, Scott Lang couldn't hold Kane the Conqueror's jockstrap. But for some strange unearthly reason, they managed, now granted with some help from Wasp, she finally showed up, um, dispatched Kane the Conqueror. I, I just I can't rock with it. I couldn't accept that. I get it once again. I get it. But I don't mean I have to like it. I don't really like it. But overall, as I said before, I didn't hate this movie. I didn't hate it. It's in the same ballpark as the other two Ant-Man films. It's pretty pretty average. It didn't blow my socks off, but yet and still I didn't leave the theater like, oh man. It was just like whatever. And that's how I felt. Aside from a couple of performances, that's it. You know. So, well, before I give the grade, I'll address those post credit scenes. The post credit scene with the other Kang variants, once again, it was the performances that saved this movie. Two in particular, but the main one being Jonathan Majors. Him playing these different variants of Kang in that post credit scene or the mid credit scene was like, well, the post credit scene as well. It was like, man, this dude is just having the time of his life. He's able to sit back and just create these characters, different characters from the same variant. And from the same, it's like the dude had multiple personalities. I don't know. They needed to cast somebody who can hold this down, and they hit this one out of the park. Um, you see him as uh Romatot. I think that was the Scarlet Centaurian, I believe. Uh, what was the other one? Oh my god! Well, it was millions of them, but the three main ones that they were focusing on was like, oh man! And then the post credit scene where we get our little sneak peek at Loki. Look like they're setting up Loki season 2. You get the from the 1920s, I believe, that other variant popped up. And I'm like, man, this dude is just like I said, Jonathan Majors. I don't understand why he was in this movie. It's like we weren't worthy of this, man. I feel like we weren't worthy of this performance from Jonathan Majors, but he clearly saved this film from being boo boo kitty. So God bless him for that. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania gets a letter grade of a C plus, slightly above average, saved by the performances of Jonathan Majors and Michelle Pfeiffer. I think I think they should just ride off into the sunset with Ant-Man films. Clearly, it can't get any better than what they have presented to us in these three films. Nothing has broke through that ceiling, but yet and still, I would say they're pretty solid to a degree. They are what they are. You know, I'm if you go looking for an Avengers level film, you're going to be mad. But if you go in there knowing, okay, Ant-Man, you've seen the first two Ant-Man films, okay, this is what we're getting. With the exception of the stakes, like I said. The first one didn't have much stakes. It pretty much was a standalone. The second one, the same way. This one here, this has huge implications for the remaining saga, the multiverse saga in the MCU. So it had a lot more stakes to it. It didn't fumble that. So that's something to cheer about. That's what I was mainly scared of, and that's why I am slightly satisfied with what I got, even though it didn't deliver on a lot of notes. I was still satisfied because they didn't drop the ball per se with the handling of King the Conqueror. So I'm happy. But what's more important is, how did you feel about the film? I would love to know how you felt about Quantumania. I mean, I know there was a lot of hype going into this film because, I mean, it's an MCU movie. Of course, there's always going to be a hype train with this film, with these films, rather. Did it meet your expectations? Did it fall below your expectations? Let me know. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. Also, look me up on Twitter at KB Radio Network, and on other social media networks, just look up the KB Radio Network. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever it is you're listening to the KB Radio Network. Don't forget, everybody, that the KB Radio Network is on YouTube. Head over to YouTube and give us a subscribe. Thank you for joining me for this review of Marvel Studios' Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Hope you enjoyed the film. Hope you enjoyed this review. Can't wait to speak to you again. Until then, I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.